So picking up on our discussions on two-point perspective, in which we learned a scientific system, not a perfect system, but a system that we can use to make the objects in our virtual drawings and paintings, our virtual three-dimensional world, seem right. We're going to borrow cues from the world around us to make our objects look more real. So having gone through two-point perspective, we're going to look at the first of a number of different measuring techniques to make sure that the objects in our drawings are fairly accurate in terms of proportion. So this is kind of important in landscape. It's really important in still life. It's extremely important in figure drawing and portrait. But anyway, let's jump in with this really simple method. So what I want to determine is what are the proportions of this rectangular solid? In other words, how tall is it compared to how wide it is? Because if I know that, I can really draw it at any size and still make it look right. But to begin with, let's take a unit of measure, like we measure things in feet or inches. This is going to be a measurement of box units or box side units or whatever you want to call it. So let's jump in. I'm using a paintbrush here because it's nice and dark and black. You can use the pencils that you use. You can use a chopstick or a knitting needle. But here's the basic operation of what's referred to as comparative measurement, or kind of a more elegant term is caliper vision. Calipers are used to measure things very, very accurately in machinery and that sort of thing. And we're going to turn our eye and our hand into a caliper. We've already discussed which eye your dominant eye is, and we did a cool, quick experiment to find out which is our dominant eye. Mine is my right eye, so I'm going to close my left eye and just use my dominant eye. And what I'm going to do is take a unit of measure off of this box and then use it to build the rest of the box. And then we're going to transfer those proportions onto our drawing. So let's go. So holding my arm out full length in front of me, I'm going to grab this measurement here with my paintbrush, and I'm going to just slide my thumb until I have this measurement. So if your hands are shaky and you have difficulty doing this, or if you've had too much espresso, use two hands. That makes it easy. So here is my unit of measure for everything I'm going to draw having to do with the size of this box. I'm taking a measurement of the side panel of the box, and that's it. That's my unit of measure. So the question is, how wide is the broader face of the box compared to the side? And you can see I've already kind of like stepped off traces, but let's go through the process. So I've slid my thumb until I find that measurement with my arm fully extended in front of me, using my right eye. Both eyes work too. So I'm going to step this measurement off across the face of the box and see how wide it is compared to this side panel from where I'm sitting. So here's one unit of measure. I'm going to swing this over so my thumb is on this edge. So that's one box side unit, two box side units, three box side units, and about a half of one of these very specific units. So this box is about 3.5 times more wide on this face than it seems to be on that side. The next thing we want to know is how tall is this box compared to these other measurements? And I can go back to this unit of measure, this arbitrary but specific to this thing unit of measure. So I'm gonna recalibrate my thumb, and starting at the very bottom here, I'm going to step off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 units of measure. So this box is 3.5 times wider on this face than it is on this face, from where I'm sitting. And it's also 6.5 times taller, apparently, than it is according to this width. So keep that in mind, and let's go to our drawing board. So taking these measurements with our box side unit of measure, I've got 3 different rectangles here that represent what the drawings will look like when they're finished. So we're going to place this same object in 3 different rectangles. It's useful to start thinking ahead to what your drawing is going to look like when it's finished and finished in frame. So will you put it into an 8x10 frame, a 9x12 frame, or do you have a bunch of really nice 5x7 frames? You can actually work backwards. It's very, very practical to work backwards from these standard measurements. I could also consider that I want my drawing to be the entire 18x24 when I'm done. But taking the measurements that we've just created, we're just going to jump in and do what's referred to as an envelope or a block in. And we've talked about that before. So the box that I want to draw is going to kind of live in this space, kind of like that. So I've got a comfortable amount of room on the top and on the bottom. I know that my box isn't going to go off the bottom. I'm going to also bring in tilt angles that are very approximate. But again, it's something you can measure using your pencil as a protractor, basically. So I can look at the box in front of me, take that angle, swing it into my drawing, and get a pretty good guess as to what that angle is in terms of the front and also the side. And keeping in mind from our study of two-point perspective, that these lines here will seem to want to meet if you extended them for a great distance on either side. They would eventually meet. They have this tilt or this perspective to them. So here's my block in, which is just 4 lines, and this is just a wild guess. It's going to be refined with the measurements that I just took. So let's say that I decide, because I'm pretty comfortable with how this sits on the page, I'm just going to kind of like jump in and make a decision. The side panel of the box is going to be this wide. Going back to the measurements we just took, here we go. We're going to spin out the rest of this box. And we determined that the box is 3.5 units wide here compared to this measurement. So let's jump in. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's a full 4, and then I'm going to divide it. So compared to the box that I'm looking at in front of me, I can already take away these lines. They've already sort of served their purpose. So according to the measurements we just took, we know, again, that the box is 3.5 times wider here on this face than it is on this face. So that's pretty good. We know where the box is sitting within our page. We still have to determine how tall it is. So same measurement, the same unit of measurement. I'm going to start at this bottom corner here, and I'm going to mark off 6.5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to draw in a full 7 and then cut it in half. So what we've done now, and I'm going to raise this angle up to here, and I'm going to partially solidify these lines. So the image, or the ghost image that I have in front of me here, is the same proportion as the box that I just kind of carefully measured. I could have done this whole thing on an 8x10 frame, in which case the box would have been kind of like here, using those same methods of envelope and then measured envelope and then carefully stepping off the measurements. I could have also decided that I want this drawing to be on a horizontal framework, and I would have blocked in the box something like this. This would have been my initial envelope, which doesn't have to be precise at all because all of these lines are going to change. But this box, that box, and that box all have the same relative measure, and that's an extremely important principle. And it gives you the power to draw really anything with a great degree of accuracy. So let's move on to the next step. So let's take the next step. We've got not only a block in, we have a fairly precise block in of our rectangular solid. And now it's time to really clean things up. I had you guys produce these cheesy cardboard triangles. If you have an official drafting triangle, all the better, but these work pretty well. So what's important here is that the table surface that I sketched in is perfectly horizontal. And the frame that I'm drawing against, again, is perfectly horizontal. So it gives me something to drop perfect verticals against. And that's really important. We, deep inside ourselves, we have a very, very precise sense of horizontality. Is that the word for it? And verticality. We know if we're standing up straight or if we're leaning over to one side or another. So your objects in your drawing really have to have the rightness that we understand is part of the world that we're in. If these verticals aren't vertical, things start getting really crazy and really not believable in this case. So let's take these lines, which are kind of ghosted in, they're still pentimenti, and let's just true them up. So I'm going to place my triangle right here. And again, I'm not going to go full strength because this could still be adjusted, but that's the leading edge of this rectangle. Similarly, here's the back edge, the back right side. That's going to be a pretty good straight line. And then this edge, and we know where it is in space because we've measured, is somewhere around there. So that's pretty precise. The next thing we want to do is to bring in our tilt angles from our observed objects. So we're going to swing, we're going to look at the object in front of us here. We're going to take this angle, we're going to swing it into our drawing. And we're going to firm up these four angles. So at this point, we can really solidify all of these lines. They look pretty good. Okay, so just for emphasis, I'm going to go ahead and really fill these lines in with a very, very solid magic marker so you can see what the finished product looks like. So that's a representation of the rectangular solid that I saw in front of me. These lines are sort of very, very, very gently converging. These two lines, the top and the bottom edge, are also converging somewhere in deep space. But we now have a drawing that has the proportions of our original model. And just understand that we could have done that same operation on an 8x10 scale, a 5x7 scale, or even an 18x24 scale. And our boxes would still have the correct proportions. You can also decide, sort of in a later editing process, that you can go back and adjust some of these line angles to make them even more dramatic. I can take this line and I can afford to really scrunch it down just a little bit more, a few more degrees, and now you get a much more dramatic collapse into space. So that's really up to you. These are things that you can adjust now that you know the process, and now that you have the power of Caliper Vision. You can get things pretty accurate and then still go back and edit.